Okay, so you're tuning in, I guess, because you really want to know what's going on in India. You know, the stuff that actually matters, especially if you're getting ready for the UPSC exams.
Yeah, getting beyond those headlines right down to the core issues.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here, sort of a shortcut to understanding how things really work in India. And today we're going deep on one very specific but very important part of Indian governance, something that could come up in your mains exam for sure, maybe even prelims.
We're diving into the challenges facing India's security governance architecture, specifically looking at the state of policing across the country.
And to really get into this, we're going to be drawing from an insightful analysis by the Business Standard.
We're going to break down how India policing has evolved over time, the key issues it's facing now, and what could be done to make things better.
All of this with the UPSC aspirant in mind, of course, giving you the context and information that's directly relevant to your studies. So to kick things off, there's a pretty striking statistic that really kind of highlights the scale of the challenge we're talking about. Over 21% of the positions in state police forces across India are vacant.
Yeah, that's not just a number that points to some serious issues with operational capacity.
And it puts India in a situation where we're significantly under-policed compared to what the UN recommends. So we're talking like around 155 police officers for every 100,000 citizens, while the UN suggests we should have at least 222.
And what's even more concerning is that this shortage hits those states that are already struggling with law and order issues the hardest.
Right, like West Bengal, Mizoram, Haryana.
Yeah, their vacancy rates are really alarming. I mean, we're talking 39.42%, 35.06%, and 32% respectively. That's not just a percentage.
Yeah.
It means they have limited resources on the ground, which could really affect how quickly they can respond to incidents and their ability to do their jobs effectively.
And for those of you listening who are deep in UPSC prep, it's really important to see how these personnel shortages connect to bigger things in society. I mean, this isn't just an administrative problem. It has real consequences for public safety, especially for the most vulnerable people in our population.
Absolutely. And when you think about it from an even broader perspective, it impacts the economy too. A secure environment is so important for economic activity, especially for those small and medium businesses that are vital for India's growth. When there's not enough policing, it creates uncertainty and insecurity, which can make it much harder for them to function and grow.
So that's the current situation. But how did we get here? How did the Indian police system evolve to this point?
Well, you have to go back to our colonial past, really. The foundation of the modern Indian police system is the Police Act of 1861, enacted by the British. And for those preparing for UPSC, it's crucial to understand that this legislation wasn't really about public service. Its primary goal was to maintain control, keep that colonial authority.
Right, it set up this very centralized hierarchical structure designed more to enforce the will of the colonial government than to actually serve the public.
Yeah.
And even after India became independent, this basic structure remained largely in place. So what were the implications of keeping this system?
Well, while it may have provided some sense of continuity immediately after independence, it quickly became clear that this colonial model had inherent limitations and wasn't very efficient in a democratic nation. It made it easier for things like corruption to take root, and building public trust was always a struggle. The way it was set up meant they were accountable more to the government than to the people they were policing.
So then over the years, there were various attempts to reform the system, right? The Business Standard Analysis talks about a series of committees formed to address these issues, starting with the Gore Committee in 1971. What was the main goal there?
Well, the Gore Committee was kind of an early realization that things needed to change. They recognized that independent India needed a different kind of police force, one that was more professional and service-oriented. The old colonial model just didn't fit anymore.
And then we have the National Police Commission, a pretty important body that was active from 1977 to 1981. What were some of their key recommendations for transforming the police force?
They made some really pivotal recommendations. One of the most significant was separating the maintenance of law and order from crime investigation. They also really pushed for fixed tenures for senior police officers to reduce the chance of political interference. These were pretty forward-thinking ideas, all aimed at making the police more professional and independent.
Those sound like essential changes to improve efficiency and fairness. But why weren't they implemented more widely? The article mentions resistance to these reforms. What kind of resistance?
That's a key point to grasp for your UPSC preparation. These reforms faced strong opposition from various groups both within the government and the bureaucracy. There was a reluctance to give up control and a fear of upsetting the existing power dynamics. This pattern of recommendations meeting resistance sadly became a recurring theme in later reform efforts, too.
Like with the Ribeiro Committee in 1998 and the Padmanabhaya Committee in 2000, they basically built upon the earlier calls for reform, right?
Exactly. They reinforced the need for independent oversight to hold the police accountable, stressed the importance of modern training to equip the force for new challenges, and highlighted the role of community policing in building trust and making them more effective. But just like before, implementation on the ground was limited.
And then there's the Mallimath Committee in the early 2000s from 2002 to 2003. They seem to focus on more specialized aspects of policing.
Yes, they did. The Mallimath Committee recognized that crimes were becoming more complex and that the police needed specialized skills. They recommended strengthening forensic science capabilities and even suggested creating a central law enforcement agency to handle crimes that cross state lines. But again, most of their suggestions weren't implemented across the country.
It seems like a recurring pattern. A lot of good ideas and recommendations, but a real struggle to make them happen. However, the Supreme Court's intervention in 2006 with the Prakash Singh judgment felt like a big turning point because it actually mandated reforms.
Yeah.
What did that judgment require?
The Prakash Singh judgment was a landmark moment. It was the Supreme Court saying enough is enough. They were tired of the lack of action on all these recommendations. So they issued a set of legally binding directives that state governments had to follow. These included setting up state security commissions to oversee the police, ensuring fixed tenures for key police officers to protect them from arbitrary transfers, and crucially separating investigation and law and order duties at the police station level.
So these were orders with legal force behind them. Did that finally lead to widespread change?
Well, while the Prakash Singh judgment provided a strong legal basis and motivation for reform, the actual implementation across states has been inconsistent. In many cases, the true spirit of those directives has been diluted. Some states made the necessary legal changes, but the intended autonomy and accountability haven't always been fully realized.
And what about more recent initiatives? The business standard mentions things like smart policing from around 2015 and the modernization of police forces scheme. What are those all about?
These are newer strategies to improve policing in the 21st century. The smart policing concept is all about using technology, things like AI, to predict where crimes might happen, big data to understand crime patterns, and connecting with the public through online platforms. The MPF scheme is more about providing resources to modernize the force, things like better weapons, upgraded forensics labs, stronger cybercrime units, and improved communication.
And there's also the Model Police Act from 2006 and those recommendations from the NHRC in 2021. What aspects of police reform do they address?
The Model Police Act was designed to be a guide for states to update their police laws with a focus on police autonomy and accountability to the public. The NHRC recommendations reinforce those ideas, especially in areas like how the police conduct surveillance, the need for transparency in their actions, and respecting human rights in law enforcement.
But the overall message from the business standard seems to be that despite all these efforts, there's still something missing, something fundamental that's preventing real transformation in Indian policing. What do you think that is?
The key issue is that while technology upgrades and modernization are important, they can't fix everything. The lack of deep structural reforms is what's holding us back. It's like trying to run the latest software on an old computer. The fundamental limitations are still there. Unless we address things like political interference mechanisms for accountability and outdated laws, modernization won't have its full impact.
So we've got a good overview of the history and the current situation, but let's get into the specifics. What are the key issues that are plaguing Indian policing today? And that huge shortage of personnel, like we talked about with the UN-India comparison, that's a pretty stark starting point. What are the immediate challenges that come from that?
The impact is massive, and it affects how the police operate in many ways. The most immediate problem is that the existing force is completely overworked. This affects law enforcement quality because resources are stretched thin, making crime prevention harder, response times to incidents are slower, and the quality of investigations suffers because officers are handling too many cases and are under pressure to close them quickly. In the end, it contributes to the public losing trust in the police's ability to protect them.
Which leads us to the next big issue.
Yeah.
The police force is not only understaffed, but they're also overworked and often underpaid for what they do. Working 16, 18-hour days is just unsustainable in any job, let alone one that requires constant alertness and responsibility. What are the broader consequences of these terrible working conditions?
It goes way beyond just how individual officers feel. These long hours, combined with all the different duties they have, from regular law enforcement to election duties and VIP protection, all without enough rest or fair pay, creates huge stress. A survey mentioned in the Business Standard found that over 83% of police personnel report high levels of stress. This kind of constant pressure leads to burnout, less efficiency, bad decisions in critical situations, and unfortunately, it can make them more susceptible to corruption because of financial strain and exhaustion. It all adds up to them not being able to do their jobs effectively and ethically, which further damages public trust.
Another serious problem the source brings up is the influence of politics on how the police force operates. It seems to undermine the whole idea of impartial and professional law enforcement. What are the ways this politicization happens, and what are its worst effects?
Political interference in policing takes many forms, and it always damages the professionalism and independence of the force. One common tactic is constantly transferring police officers based on political reasons instead of merit or operational needs. This hurts morale and continuity. They're often pressured to act in favor of certain political interests or against political opponents, leading to biased investigations and unequal application of the law. Then you have the misuse of investigative agencies for political purposes, which further erodes public faith in their impartiality. A 2019 report from Delhi found that 72% of officers had experienced political pressure. This kind of interference can seriously damage the rule of law, which is a fundamental part of good governance.
That 72% figure from the Delhi report is really shocking. It shows how deep this culture of influence runs.
Exactly. It highlights how decisions in policing can be swayed by political motives instead of facts and evidence. The misuse of sedition laws and targeting individuals based on their political affiliations are even more worrying signs of this trend, with serious implications for fundamental rights and freedoms.
Then there's the issue of police brutality and the use of excessive force, particularly during protests. We've seen this in the news many times. What are the factors behind this approach, and how does it affect public perception and trust?
There seems to be a growing trend of police using too much force when dealing with protests and civil unrest. The use of tear gas, rubber bullets, and baton charges, as seen during the farmers' protests and the CAA-NRC demonstrations, raises ethical and legal questions about whether the force used was appropriate and if human rights were respected. The recent wrestlers' protest is another concerning example that got a lot of criticism. These actions alienate the public, damage the image of the police as protectors, and worsen the already fragile trust between the police and the communities they're supposed to serve. The Business Standard also pointed out that a disturbing 669 people died in police custody between April 2017 and March 2022, showing how urgently we need greater accountability and respect for due process.
Moving on, the Business Standard analysis also talks about shortcomings in the training given to police personnel and the continued use of outdated methods. In a world where crime is constantly evolving, this seems like a major weakness. What are the specific problems with the current training, and how do they affect things on the ground?
This is a huge area for improvement. Today's policing needs specialized skills like modern crime-solving techniques, forensics, cybercrime investigation, and effective community engagement. But many police officers haven't received proper training in these areas. This leads to poor investigations, more wrongful arrests, and a huge backlog of cases in the courts. Plus, there's often not enough training in handling sensitive cases, especially those involving gender-based violence, which can have terrible consequences for victims. A CAG report found that a low percentage of officers are properly trained, and there are issues with weapon training and infrastructure. Then you have the fact that India has way fewer forensic scientists per capita than developed countries, highlighting our limitations in applying scientific methods to investigations. All these deficiencies directly affect how well our justice system works.
Another fundamental problem mentioned in the Business Standard is the weakness of community policing in India and the lack of public trust in the police. This breakdown in the relationship between law enforcement and citizens seems to be at the heart of many of these challenges. Why haven't community policing efforts been more successful, and what are the consequences of this lack of trust?
There are several reasons why community policing hasn't worked as well as it could have in India. It goes back to the historical view of police as a tool of state control rather than a service provider. Then there's the lack of resources and training for community policing initiatives, and sometimes a lack of real commitment from police leadership. The result is a huge gap in trust, especially among marginalized communities like Dalits, Adivasis, and religious minorities who might have historical reasons to be wary of the police. This lack of trust prevents vital information from reaching the police, which could help prevent and investigate crimes. It creates a feeling of alienation and makes it harder for the police to maintain law and order. While some states have seen success with local models like Janamaitri in Kerala and Mohalla committees in Maharashtra, the failure to adopt and implement these approaches nationwide is a missed opportunity.
Then you have the issue of slow modernization within the police force. Many areas are still using outdated equipment and infrastructure. In today's world of rapid technological advancement, this must be a major obstacle. What are the biggest gaps in terms of technology and equipment, and how do they hold the police back from tackling modern crime?
The lack of modernization is a major problem. Many police stations lack basic forensic tools for gathering and analyzing evidence, outdated or non-existent surveillance technology, and the sophisticated cybercrime tracking systems they need to fight online crime. Even essential things like proper weapons protective gear and reliable communications are often in short supply. Many police stations still rely on manual paperwork instead of using digital solutions for record keeping and case management, which shows how slow they've been to adopt technology. The Business Standard mentioned a 2022 statistic showing that in many states there's a severe shortage of computers and laptops, with one device often shared by 11 or more officers. This lack of basic technology really limits their efficiency response times and ability to effectively investigate and prevent crime in the 21st century.
And finally, the Business Standard brings up the issue of underrepresentation of women in the police force. Despite efforts to increase their numbers, the percentage of women remains low. What are the main implications of this, especially with the rise in crimes against women?
The fact that only around 11.75% of police personnel in India are women, despite attempts to increase that number, has serious consequences. It can discourage women from reporting crimes, especially sensitive ones like sexual assault and domestic violence, because they might not feel comfortable talking to male officers. Also, a lack of women in the police force can sometimes lead to a lack of understanding and empathy when handling gender-based violence cases, which can result in insensitive investigations or a failure to grasp the trauma that victims experience. Increasing the number of women in policing isn't just about gender equality. It's crucial for making law enforcement more effective and sensitive, especially in cases affecting women.
So we've covered a lot of concerning issues facing Indian policing today. Now, for those of you preparing for UPSC, it's not enough to just understand the problems. You also need to know about potential solutions. The Business Standard article outlines several measures to improve the police force, which could be useful points for your mains answers. Let's start with that critical issue of manpower shortage. What are some strategies to tackle this long-standing problem?
To fix the severe shortage of personnel, we need a multi-pronged approach. First, we need sustained and transparent recruitment drives to fill those vacancies. Second, we have to improve working conditions, things like reducing work hours, ensuring enough rest, and providing fair compensation to attract and retain talented people. Third, we need a much bigger budget for the police to support a larger and better equipped force. And we need to implement that Prakash Singh case directive that says key police officers should have a minimum tenure of 2 years to bring more stability and efficiency to the ranks.
And how can we address the issue of political influence and ensure greater autonomy for the police in their daily operations? This seems crucial for building public trust and ensuring impartial law enforcement.
Depoliticization and true police autonomy are essential for a professional and accountable police force. We need to fully implement the state security commissions, as recommended by the National Police Commission, to provide civilian oversight and shield the police from political interference. We also need to empower those police establishment boards, as suggested by the Ribeiro Committee, so they can handle transfers, postings, and promotions based on merit instead of politics. Ultimately, we need to change the outdated Police Act of 1861, following the principles in the Model Police Act of 2006, to legally guarantee autonomy and accountability.
It's clear that modernizing the infrastructure and equipment is absolutely essential in this day and age. What are some of the key technological upgrades and resource improvements that should be prioritized?
We need to move faster towards tech-driven policing. This means investing in AI and big data for predicting crime and analyzing patterns, and using drones for surveillance and monitoring. We should expand the modernization of police forces scheme to include widespread CCTV systems, well-equipped forensic labs at the district-level, body cameras for transparency, GPS-enabled patrol cars, and upgraded cybercrime units with the latest technology and trained personnel, as the Padmanabhaya Committee recommended. We should also implement the NHRC's directive to install CCTV cameras with night vision in all police stations for transparency and accountability.
Many committees have recommended specializing within the police force and separating investigation duties from law and order duties. What are the benefits of these structural changes?
As the Melamath Committee suggested, specialization and separation of functions can make the police force more efficient and effective. By having separate wings for investigation and law and order, officers can develop specific skills and focus on their core tasks. A dedicated crime investigation unit for complex cases can lead to more convictions. We also need to update training to include forensics, legal procedures, and digital investigation techniques. Bringing back beat policing, as suggested by the Padmanabhaya Committee, can improve local intelligence gathering and community engagement for preventing crime. These changes aim to improve both investigations and the maintenance of peace and order.
Building and maintaining public trust through community policing seems like a long-term goal, but an essential one. What can we do to expand and strengthen community policing nationwide?
We need to expand successful models like Kerala's Janamaithri Suraksha project and Maharashtra's Mohalla committees to other parts of the country, adapting them to local needs. We should have social workers and psychologists in police stations to improve the handling of sensitive cases and support victims. We need regular and meaningful dialogues between the police and public outreach programs and citizen advisory committees to bridge the trust gap, especially with marginalized communities. These initiatives can make the police more approachable and responsive to the needs of the people they serve.
Increasing the number of women in the police force and ensuring gender sensitivity at all levels is crucial for a more inclusive and effective law enforcement agency. What specific measures can help achieve these goals?
To get more women in the police, we need to aim for the 33% target recommended by the Padmanabhaya Committee. We can do this through targeted recruitment and by creating a more supportive work environment for women officers. This means having all women police stations in every district and female officers in all regular stations to encourage more women to report crimes and to handle cases with greater sensitivity. Gender sensitization training should be mandatory at all levels of police education and in-service training, as the NHRC suggested. We also need to provide better support systems for women officers like childcare facilities, flexible work hours, and proper facilities to improve retention rates and create a fairer workplace.
And lastly, the business standard emphasizes the need for better coordination between the police and the judiciary for a more efficient criminal justice system. What are the key areas for improvement and what steps can be taken?
Better coordination can reduce delays in the system. We should prioritize digitizing FIRs and making that information easily available to the judiciary, integrating police systems with e-court platforms, and fast-tracking cases involving under-trials, as the Malimath Committee recommended. Having dedicated police judiciary liaison officers in each district can improve communication, streamline evidence presentation, and resolve coordination problems. Expanding the use of plea bargaining in appropriate cases can also ease the burden on the courts and deliver faster justice in less serious crimes.
So to sum it all up for you, our listeners who are preparing for your UPSC exams, our deep dive into this way. Business standard analysis shows that India's policing system is facing a lot of deeply rooted problems, many stemming from our colonial past. These challenges include a severe lack of personnel, widespread political influence, insufficient modernization, outdated training, and a big lack of public trust. Fixing these complex issues requires a comprehensive approach going beyond temporary fixes and implementing real structural reforms across the entire law enforcement system.
What's really interesting and crucial for a thorough understanding for your UPSC preparation is how all these challenges are connected. For example, chronic understaffing directly contributes to stress and burnout among police officers, which can affect their professionalism and make them more vulnerable to political pressure or even corruption. Likewise, inadequate training prevents them from using modern crime-solving techniques and community-oriented approaches, further eroding public trust and hindering their effectiveness. It's a complex web of interconnected problems that needs a coordinated and strategic solution.
So for you, the UPSC aspirant, understanding this intricate landscape of challenges and potential solutions is absolutely vital. It directly relates to several key topics in the UPSC syllabus, like governance, law and order, social justice, and current national issues. Being able to critically analyze these issues, looking at their history, how they manifest today, and the potential solutions, will definitely show the depth of understanding and analytical skills that UPSC examiners are looking for.
This brings up a key question for you to think about as you continue your UPSC preparation. Considering how deeply policing is intertwined with so many aspects of our society and governance, what do you think is the single most impactful reform that could bring positive and transformative change to India's entire security system?
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this important question. So if you found this discussion helpful for your UPSC preparation, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more insights on crucial topics. And feel free to leave a comment below with any questions you have or your own views on police reforms in India. Just a reminder that our main source for this analysis was the Business Standard, which provided a great foundation for understanding this complex and vital issue.